So thanks everybody for joining the Istio Networking community meeting. We have actually a very light agenda today. So first item is to look at some critical issues and do a bit of triage. And the second item is some feedback request on istioctl proxy commands. So I'm not sure if Liam, are you in the meeting? I think it was you who added that. Okay, cool. And if there is anything else, please add it here. Otherwise, we'll probably be able to finish a bit earlier than normal. So the first item, which is critical issue triage. So Louis is not yet in. I'm actually thinking of maybe like doing this as a second item. If Liam, you would be okay to start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
I can't demo the proxy status though because I'm on a weird branch that I haven't updated to master that I've just realized. So I'm gonna have to use kind of a custom build and just do the proxy config stuff. But I can leave. I don't know how I can link to it actually. I don't know. I will quickly check that the proxy config command is working in my current build.
Do you want to share anything? Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, my screen. If I can work out how to. Okay.
Okay, we're able to see.
Okay. Can you see my terminal now? I might need to zoom.
Yes, although it's very, the fonts are tiny, so.
Hello? So let's see if I can remember what all the commands are. Let's do. Nope, should be built, that's fine. So if I get pods running, I'm pointing at my dev cluster, so that's fine. Basically, so the proxy status command, which I can't actually show you because of the weird build I've got, that I can show you, and I'll tweet out about it actually, so I can show you exactly kind of what it looks like. So the command, the proxy status command, basically talks to pilot or talks to each of the pilots and gets a list of all of the proxies connected to them and their synchronization status.
So do you want to show your Twitter now?
Sorry?
Do you want to show your Twitter? Or your
yeah. I'm trying to find a picture of the command because I do not have a working build on my laptop's running very slowly.
I see.
Hangouts. So yeah, the idea is that you would use the proxy status command to kind of work out or to be able to look at kind of where your synchronization stuff's going wrong. I don't know if it's starting to load. But yeah, you'd look at it, it tells you it's got where the CDS is synced, LDS is synced. It tells you the percentage of endpoints. So that's endpoints compared to total endpoints are synced. And then it tells you whether or not RDS is synced. And it also allows you to kind of see which pilots each of your envoys are connected to. This is going very slowly.
Yeah, this is great. So you basically are showing status from all the envoys plus the pilots, right?
So what it's actually showing is it's showing all the status of all the envoys, but it's getting it from pilot. So we store the nonce, which is basically the time at which the last update was sent, and then envoy responds saying with the next discovery request acknowledging that it has received that status update. So we then take that information in istioctl and we then synchronize. We work out whether or not it's synchronized or whether or not it's stale. Or in terms of RDS here, which I'm assuming you can now all see the picture on my screen.
Yeah, it looks good.
Not sent, so we're not sending routes at all to egress gateways and ingress gateways because I believe they don't request to watch routes. So you can see there it's not being sent. So this kind of the high level. I want to see everything that's going on in my mesh. You can filter by proxy ID. So you can just, if you wanted to, the details one, you just do istioctl proxy status details v1 whatever with the dot namespace on the end, and then it will just sync to that one. So you can look for specific ones. I think it also does just strings contains matching. So you could just do details -v1, and it would show you if you had multiple details v1 pods. That it would show you all of them, and then you could see which ones were potentially out of sync. So that's kind of the high level one that you do. You kind of look and maybe see that something's stale, and then you use the endpoint command to do stuff like working out what's in here. So type out the full command. So you do endpoint, and then let's do product page. Clusters, for instance, and that will show you. Use my own commands. Because I changed the order, so the commands are a bit more organized. It's running very slow. So this kind of splits up stuff. So this is basically all just summarizing information from the config dump from Envoy. It will show you kind of a high level thing, and then you can filter like by port. So if I did 9080, it would just show me all things, all clusters with port 9080, which isn't in itself that particularly useful. But if I filter by port 53, for instance, and then ask for JSON, it'll dump out the entire, or it'll dump out the config for that specific cluster. So you can then kind of go in and make sure that stuff's correct. It's the same for listeners. So there's a specific thing, collection of things you can search on and filter on, which is different for each command. They're done as flags because I can think of a nice way to properly do it. This is alias to L as well, so I'll just do that. So listeners, we've got address, port, and type. And then with the same, you can just, I'll stick a -o JSON, but you can filter on whatever and go in and actually look at the config dump for a specific thing. There's obviously lots here because I just dumped everything. So you can go in and look at that specific thing. Now there is a bug you can see here where it's gone really far to the right. That's a bug with protobuf, which I've raised against them. So hopefully that gets fixed eventually. And then you can do summary of routes as well. So routes, this is just the RDS routes, so this won't give you the routes that are in line with listeners. There's only name and the amount of virtual hosts outputted in the summary. You can get the full config dump using the -o JSON. I don't think I've implemented that yet. But I'm open to what information is available in these summary commands. That's kind of what I'm asking for. And then eventually the idea would be we can do some kind of like proxy diff or proxy config diff or something. And the idea would be it takes the dynamic clusters from the Envoy config dump from the API, and then it compares them to what Pilot gives would give you as a response if you came as that proxy. And then we can diff those to work out kind of what exactly is out of sync. But that's kind of a bit further down the line. I'm just kind of looking for the summary or feedback on the summary. So if I just quickly show all of them in a line so I can get, so people can quickly see them. So this is kind of general fields. I can only really get, or we can only really get information that's in the config dump. So for those who aren't familiar, there's a new admin API config dump command with Envoy, and that's where we're getting all this information from. But yeah, there is. I know, Andrew, you raised an issue for basically having going through each envoy in a kube cluster and it dumping its full config to a basically to a binary. So a user could send it over and then basically as a config dump for their entire mesh, so we can then debug it. I'll implement that as well at some point. But yeah, this is just generally for this stuff. And I'm gonna stop rambling and let someone else talk.
This is super useful and like super exciting, and it's great to have this. Like I think we really need to get better at troubleshooting, and that will help us like just in general development. Plus, whenever this will be run in production, that will like be awesome, really, and it is already awesome like this. What we have, yes, and my question related to your question about the issue I opened. So that is exactly to help with the troubleshooting whenever this is run on a big cluster and they don't know exactly what's going on, where is the issue. So it would be good to have run a simple command and gather everything from pilot and from all the Envoy proxies and put it in a nice binary, attach it to the GitHub issue, because the type of issues we're seeing now sound like traffic loss, or I cannot reach my service, or, or things got bad after running 2 weeks in production, right? Yeah. So the other idea would be to, like at the beginning of a deployment, then run that command and get the status. And then if something goes wrong, like run it again and then do the diff again, just as you mentioned, between pilot and proxy. Also diff between really the operational state at various points in time, so we can narrow down the problems, right? Yeah. So this is like, it's super useful, definitely.
And it makes it much easier to understand kind of how all the cluster listener routes interaction works, because sometimes you just get the dump of everything and it's quite confusing. So
right. Actually, what I would also like to see, and I'm sure this is possible, if I'm like, for instance, to be able to trace a particular host or the traffic for a particular floor host. Like if I give the host, I'd like to see the listener, associated with it, or the listener, the route, the cluster, the endpoint, and basically be able to understand where is the issue. And ideally across multiple, right? So basically do what the Envoy does internally, but more from a theoretical or how is it called? Synthetic, I think it's the word.
So you'd say something like, I'm making a request to this host. Can you please list me how Envoy would go through the process to route the correct location?
Right, something like that. I'm sure it's possible. It's probably non-trivial, but it must be possible.
Yeah, there's that. Well, it must be, because Envoy does it, right, from the same amount of information. So it must be. Yeah, I can see a way that you could work that out. Okay, I'll make some notes.
Is there any way to get the circuit breaking in here as a column?
Where's the circuit breaking information stored? Is it in LDS?
In RDS.
It's in RDS.
No, circuit breaking is in CDS.
It's in CDS.
Okay.
Probably won't have any circuit breaking set up, so it's probably not helpful.
I don't think circuit breaking is useful here. That's more like statistics from Envoy and not like statistics between pilot and Envoy in terms of the XDS protocols. I mean, those would belong on a proper dashboard with all of the other Envoy metrics that are coming in. And this is just simply listing what pilot has sent and what has been acted in the protocol exchange.
Yeah. And the idea is that the first kind of clusters is just a high-level summary, and then you can go filter on that specific cluster to just get that information. So you can get the full config dump. So it'll be in there, it just won't be on the summary page. Like I said, I'm open to feedback. If you've got any feedback, just message me on the Istio Slack channel, and we can have a discussion there. I think it's probably
Do you have any plans to make it also like browser friendly? To add HTTP links. So if I'm on I'm on a listener pointing to a route, I could actually click on it from a browser.
We expose all this information. Oh, do we? Not the Envoy information, actually. So yes and no. I don't know. Me and Sharon were chatting about this actually. Whether or not we're doing a Istio dashboard is kind of like a kube dashboard type thing, or whether or not we're going to kind of talk to people like the Kiali team, and this is something they can do. It's kind of dependent on that type of thing. It's basically whether or not we're going to do some form of lowest common denominator Istio dashboard type thing. But the information's all there. You just have to have some probably API running or microservice running in your cluster that exposes this information on an API somewhere. But it would just actually the Envoy admin API, this one, and the proxy status is just calling this. I added a syncz endpoint to Envoy, and you just call that, and you can generate all of the stuff from that information. So there's no reason it can't be done. It's just whether or not we want to focus on some kind of dashboard.
Okay. And I have a question. So the sync status, is it based on the ACK/NACK received from Envoy?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So I added some code to keep track of that. So on each connection, there's just a like cluster rack, cluster sent, and then list routes, whatever, and endpoints, and then it just dumps all that information when you call the syncz thing, and you just have to go through each pilot. Well, behind the covers, all it does, it gets a list of pilots, calls each one of them on the syncz endpoint, and then just combines all the input and works it all out.
Okay.
Short question. The proxy config tool from release 0.8 until now, and one thing I recall I noticed is that getting the endpoint information was not possible for gateways, so that somehow didn't work. I mean, I could get them with not from endpoint but from pilot, but would be interesting to really get them.
The reason we can't get that is because Envoy doesn't expose that information in the config dump. It exposes 4 things in the config dump. It does clusters list or CDS, LDS, RDS, and the bootstrap config. So that's kind of the only information we can get from Envoy. For some reason, Envoy doesn't dump that. I'm sure. I don't know if there are any plans for Envoy to dump that.
So what are you missing? The endpoint information?
So we can get the information from Pilot,
okay.
We can't get it from Envoy.
I missed that completely. Sorry, can you just say that slowly again?
So we can get the endpoint information from Pilot,
Yes.
but Envoy's config dump in the admin API doesn't have that
So I think long term, yes, ideally we would surface it via config dump. Today, if you go to the /clusters handler, which is also emits JSON, you can actually pull out a whole bunch of effectively the same information. Like it has a cluster information and then the constituent members of the cluster. Right? So you can actually look at the individual endpoints in that handler.
Okay, I'll take a look.
So what was the reason for not adding endpoints? Is it the scale? Is it
I
too
think
big?
it just has to do with this code complexity at the time that this was implemented. Endpoints behave a bit differently than other parts of the system. They updated independently and a few things like that. But yeah, I honestly don't know the full context. You'd have to chat with Matt Klein, who implemented this. But I think it's certainly something that we could add. And if someone's interested in doing that, they can do that. But we have effectively equivalent information today.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go and take a look at the clusters because we in the 0.8 we are actually using the /clusters, but this command doesn't. This one just purely parses the config dump and works out from that.
Right, it will be easy to add it here, right? That's part of the config.
And just a quick FYI, config dump is marked V2 alpha and is in an experimental status. It's not going to change radically, but there's a PR in flight right now to rearrange some of the fields, so you might see occasional breakage, and that will continue probably at least for the next week or so. I'm in the moment trying to actually fix up a bunch of pretty terrible stuff to do with actually being able to reparse that JSON back into proto form, which is very nice to have, but right now protobuf itself is broken, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah, I did have to raise an issue against the protobuf repo because when it was going to the right off the screen here, it just starts adding in random amounts of white space.
Wow, that one I was not familiar with, but there's certainly other issues. For example, the case of the fields gets it seems to be almost ad hoc. We in general in Envoy prefer that it doesn't do the snake case conversion, but a camel case conversion, but it does. So I fixed that.
I've noticed that as well.
And there's also the fact that you just can't round trip from the proto in Envoy to the JSON to another proto. It's something like your tool or some of our internal monitoring tools, and that's a problem. And that has to do with just some corner case in protobuf where if you nest within a map field in any, it just doesn't handle that correctly. So I'm fixing that.
Nice.
Any more feedback or anything to say on this topic?
Is there any sort of authorization terms for being able to access this from istioctl? I mean, I don't even know what the capability really would be at the Envoy level for controlling that, but any ideas there, I guess?
So what this is doing, so it works with MTLS, is this does, so this will only work with kube, because kube is obviously opinionated on how it does stuff, so we can assume where stuff is. So what it does is under the covers, it does a kube exec into the Istio proxy container, and then calls a binary on Istio, or calls the Istio proxy binary and a command on there, and then that calls the local Envoy. So there is basically, because if you were to turn MTLS on, you would have to have exec privileges into the proxy container, basically. But other than that, not really.
So if you have access to the container with your kube service account or user, you can see all this.
And the same with the status is just going to pilot discovery rather than the Istio proxy container.
Okay.
It works through kube exec, and it has to work that way because once you turn MTLS on, you'll obviously just get bounced if you try to port forward and then curl or just something like that.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, good. So we move to the next topic. In fact, I added something which I hope will be very, very short. So some people asked me on Slack about the work on pilot decomposition because they would like to follow on that. I'm not sure if the same people are here, but I'd like to describe the method to follow up on this. So there is a high-level epic that I'm sharing now. I hope you're able to see it. It's called Mesh Config API, Mesh Config Protocol Pilot Decomposition epic. And inside of this epic, there are multiple smaller issues which are equivalent to lower level tasks. For instance, there is one to define the MCP server, which is actually already committed in master. There is another one to extend the API, for instance, with an envelope to contain the metadata for namespace and name for various objects. There is an equivalent one for the Mesh Config Protocol client in Pilot For instance, that's going to be a very small change. There is one to define the common interface between the ingestion layer, which is the MCP, and the pilot data store. So I only created issues for the work we plan to do in 1.0 because there is the scope is larger. So we'll need to do the migration of the various in-process adapters to out-of-process, but there is not a particular rush to do that before 1.0. Main important part is to define the framework. So yeah, if there are any questions around that, please let me know. No? Okay. Good. And so Louis is not here, but he added an item on the agenda, which is called critical issue triage for 1.0. So I think I know what he had in mind. So I'm just going to quickly show you how many issues we have. It's quite scary, actually. So I think it was last week, various people did the triage exercise and went through all the 100 issues and labeled them with two things. So one of them is milestone. So whether this is for 1.0 or the nebulous feature. And the second thing is the priority or the pipeline, which is P0, P1, P2. Okay. So let me show you quickly how this looks like. A bunch of them have been closed, but not all of them. So right now, for instance, these are all the issues across Istio. But
Andra, are you presenting something?
Yeah, you're not seeing?
No, I'm not. I don't know.
That's a pity because I also let me try to do it again. You are okay. Present. I was presenting also. I was showing that epic, high-level epic with the sub. Are you able to see now?
Yeah.
All right.
See presenting screen.
Yeah. So, now it tells me. Okay. So actually, what I was talking about at the previous topic was this epic. And how I'm using ZenHub. So I actually am able to see all the sub-issues that belong to this epic. So for instance, they are here. I can see there are, for instance, 2 out of 10 issues completed. Okay, and whoever wants to follow the work on this particular aspect can look at this epic and just see how the issues are closed. Or for instance, from the ones that are closed, go to the actual fix. So if you're interested to see the mesh config protocol server, for instance, so that's the issue, but it was fixed in this PR. So you can see the changes easily. I'll try to keep this nice and tidy. All right. Yeah. So this does require ZenHub to be able to get this nice view of the things, right? Okay. So any other question on this now, or it's good? We switch back to triage. All right, so Louis is here also. So we actually started to talk about the triage. Okay. And I wasn't sharing my screen, so I had to redo a bit. So so for instance, right now we have 700 open issue in Istio, but let's not worry about all of them. But if I filter by area networking, for instance, I am still left with 243, right? And if I go by milestones, which is 1.0, you see we have, this is, I don't know what this is, but I don't think it's used the snapshot, but we do have the 1.0 milestone and the nebulous feature. So let's take the 1.0 milestone, 89 open, that's already much better. And out of this, some of them are actually have a P0 for which I cannot sort. So I cannot sort here based on a P0, right?
But you have to use ZenHub for that.
We'd need to load the other board. Okay, but let's see. So I can do that in a moment. I just basically want to say that out of these 89 issues, some of them are assigned, but they are not necessarily assigned to somebody that can work on them. So they are sometimes assigned to the lead or to somebody who commented in it. So I think this is a call, basically a call for help to the community to see, if you can help with fixing some of these P0 issues. I'll show you how the P0 looks like. So let's see, maybe I won't take these ones. Troubleshooting, istioctl proxy config improvements, since we just talked about the proxy config, right? So as you can see in my screen, this has pipeline P0 here where my mouse points. So this is something we would really like to have in 1.0 because it helps, like for a production quality, we need to be able to troubleshoot. I think there is no question, right? So this is currently assigned to Liam, and I think, Liam, you said you do plan to get this to a much better state. So this is great. Maybe you can remove the community help wanted label in that case, right?
Sure.
Yeah, there are a bunch of other issues which like need owners, and yeah, do you want to add something, or did you have something else in mind?
So right now we're kind of showing people how to manage and use the list.
Mm-hmm.
We also kind of need to go through and like maybe take some of these and have arguments about why they should or should not be in P0.
Oh, I see. So you would
like
really
that last
like to
one
get
shouldn't be P0.
All right. Okay.
Right? Because while it
so
does,
let's change it right now.
well, like,
or let's hear about that.
well, I'd like to hear. So the currently it's marked as P0. I don't know how it got marked as P0, but
I did. I marked.
Okay.
It. Yeah.
So it's clearly very important to be able to diagnose customer issues.
Mm-hmm.
But would we block shipping a release on this feature not being present? I'm not sure that we would.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not.
Right.
Okay.
So that already makes it P1, not P0.
Mm-hmm.
Now it can be P1 and targeted for the 1.0 milestone.
Well, not necessarily this particular fix would we block, but if we can't debug and know the state of the mesh, I would argue that is P0.
So,
you have to have debug tools to be able to easily see the state of the mesh and debug it, right?
So the thing I would make an argument there about is easily, right? We've already demonstrated today that we can get the state of the mesh out, right? You have to follow steps and documentation to do it. Right, and we ask our users to go through those steps and documentation. So, right, it is possible to debug the state of the mesh because we're seeing it happen. It's not as easy as we would like, clearly.
And it's probably not documented that well. I mean, forgive me if it is, but I generally use a form of this tool myself. But maybe it is documented well, and I just missed it. But I think it's not.
Right. So I think in the long run, right, we want to have the tool. Whether the tool does everything we want it to do at 1.0, we can clearly have a debate about. Right. What we want the documentation to be is dump the tool. Right. Run the tool, get the dump. And if you don't understand what the dump says, go get help. Right, that's basically the state that we're in. Yeah,
we also want the single command also.
Sure.
Right, like this is really useful because it's very hard to say have back and forth, get me this version of the command, get me the other extra command, and right, like this is.
I'm not going to argue that this clearly has value, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only debate I'm having is whether we would block the release on having, Baroque instructions that work 80% of the time, or a nice single line command that works 100% of the time.
Yeah. So the debate here is between, let's say, time to market, right? Because if we're in a crunch to ship the release, let's say, or for whatever reason we want to ship the release fast, and this has not made it in, we would not block. I guess that's the argument, right?
Louis, I wasn't disagreeing with you. All I was saying, like fundamentally, I wasn't trying to disagree with you. I'm not saying we need this particular command or any particular command. What I think we need is to make sure we're happy with a set of documentation that tells someone how to debug the mesh. That's all, right? And whether it's this command or some other implementation, I'm not saying that it has to be a specific way. I do believe telling someone how to debug the mesh clearly, okay, even if it's difficult for them to do it, is a P0.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't argue that we at least need documentation, right? Reasonable documentation. it's gonna even that's gonna be hard to prove coverage, right? Right,
Yeah,
which is one of the problems we're going to run into.
Yeah, there's always a there's always an interpretation in the eyes of the beholder, right?
Right. So we can make that, writing that kind of documentation, fixed effort and say somebody should go and spend 3 days making the documentation better. It should cover these things, right? Or we can try and define some qualitative criteria on the documentation, which is really hard, right? Like purely from a scoping perspective, right?
When are we planning to release 1.0? Because honestly, this entire piece of work I could probably do in like a day and a half. It's not that much work.
Okay, so then it's okay to leave it as a P0.
No. Again, there's a difference between. It's totally reasonable for people to work on P1s targeted for the milestone, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean it's like Liam could go get preempted by some other work.
Okay, so we also don't want to spend like an inordinate amount of time on a particular issue because we have 89 of them.
Right, but I think the point that's worth making in general, right, if you look at the distribution of bugs that you have, right, a very, very small percentage of them should be P0s. Because otherwise it doesn't represent any realistic prioritization.
Yeah, I agree with that. We still have quite a few that
we have 90
P0s. We have 89 in total.
Sorry, we probably have like 50.
89 overall.
Right. Yeah. So I suspect we're probably more likely in the range of having 10 to 20 actual P0s.
Yep.
Right. So here it would be. Like I'm not sure we actually in the span of 20 minutes we have left we can really go through this. Do you think?
All right, so I just wanted to go through 4 or 5.
Okay, and discuss about them.
And we all.
Do you want to pick and choose from here or? In here the first one.
Can we start by oldest or something?
If you just scroll through the list of things, right, then you would just quickly get an idea of what are the biggest things that are missing.
Well, I think it's useful as a group to go through this exercise of triage because we all have to do it, right? Like I can go through, or Sriram can go through, or Andra can go through every single bug and try and assign priority, which it has to happen anyway in terms of triage, right? But then the bug gets assigned to somebody. Right, and they kind of have to agree with the rationale, right? Because they're the ones who got to do the work.
His team is suggesting, should we focus on unassigned P0?
Yes.
Let's say maybe assigned to nobody.
Yeah, that's not a bad way.
Let's say, actually, look at this. The first one, no pod registration with non-default cluster domain. So this is actually a customer issue.
Yep.
That's the reason why it's a P0. And they have no workaround for that. So I remember I marked this initially as a P1. And then they're saying that this is really blocking for them. And I'm not sure.
Right. So this I actually know this issue pretty well.
Okay.
It is a P0 in the fact that Istio doesn't work with any Kubernetes cluster that has anything other than the default cluster DNS structure. It's also a really big thing to fix. So it's not clear that the milestone for this should be 1.0.
Which one is this?
It's number 6313. I'm sharing it.
I think we just fixed it yesterday, or maybe it was something else then.
Yeah,
no, you definitely haven't fixed it.
Greg and I were just working on testing the fix that he just implemented today.
Right, so my concern here with this one wasn't necessarily what it would take to do the fix, but what it would take to have test coverage for it. Do we have end-to-end test coverage for this?
Yeah, that is hard because you have to launch an entire cluster with a different DNS name.
Right.
And that is, you don't typically do that in GKE or anything else. You probably have to launch it in GCP.
Right, so basically what that means is that while we might have a fix, basically the feature support is in alpha because there's no consistent testing for it.
Yep.
But the customer would still be happy to try the fix.
Sure,
right?
We're always happy for customers to try fixes.
Yeah.
And so the milestone for is the issue resolved? No. right? It's because we don't have tests.
Mm-hmm.
So then the milestone would be post 1.0, but we could say, look, at least an interim fix is in place, but the issue is not resolved.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Does that make sense, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Christopher, I haven't looked at the PR or the work that you guys have done for this.
No, yeah, I think your general the general comments make sense.
Okay.
Taking that further, should that be the criteria for almost any P0 / I think the majority of stuff we want to be in beta for the GA release. So does that mean that for a feature to be considered that we need to block that on proper end-to-ends for each of those features?
So we have the test criteria, right? Mark features through the different stages, alpha, beta, and GA. There's even an issue template for features that has the list of requirements. Right, so this is a bug, right? This is a customer reported issue.
Yeah.
What there really should be is a feature enhancement request saying we need to support this.
Yeah.
Right, so it might be okay to close this one out, but the other one has to get opened.
Yeah.
And that one could be for another milestone.
Right. So actually, I think we need to get better at that feature matrix. So I had a thing with just like initially it was rough, just the type of protocols we support, circuit breaking, just the major features. But maybe we need to get into like
so that's like any feature enhancement request in GitHub should be informing that spreadsheet.
Right.
Certainly should be informing the release notes.
Yeah, I'll try to get all this, especially with SNI. We have so many variations, for instance. I would like to make sure, we cover them.
Let's go through a few more.
Yeah.
Because this is a good, so I think, Christopher, what should happen here is, because this was reported as a bug, right? Not as an enhancement.
We don't. Yeah, for them it's a bug because they cannot run the cluster at all.
Right, so it's okay to close out the bug, but we should open an enhancement request on networking to say we need to properly support arbitrary DNS namespaces, right? And that should be tracked like any other feature development work.
So Christopher, will you please take this action? Because you are like Greg, whoever did the work to...
Yeah, is Greg on the call? Yeah, I'll follow up with Greg after.
Okay, great.
Okay, let's do another one.
And yeah, I actually wanted to say that for 1.0, we don't have to have all or the majority of the features in beta, right? But we need to have the core features in beta, right? Like we may have many smaller features that they can be just alpha.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I know this one.
This one.
Okay. So this is actually the result of the security bug we fixed in 0.8, where where one particular envoy can be used as a trampoline to reach some other service by spoofing the host header. And the fix was to use the inbound ports to basically not to capture the entire traffic in Envoy and to let some traffic bypass Envoy. And the requirement was for every pod to actually list their container port so we can use them in inbound ports. And a few people have complained that this is, I guess, too much or they don't know about. And we have another design to fix that initial issue, which requires either removing the wildcard listener and listing every single service in a listener, or otherwise splitting the listener into inbound and outbound. Okay, I guess that's a P0.
Yes.
It's 1.0, and the envoy part will be assigned to Piotr, so there is a corresponding envoy change if we're going especially with the listener split. And we're going to need some change in pilot. It's not going to be horrible. In fact, it's going to be very easy. It involves having two ports, like changing the IP tables. to direct traffic to 2 different ports instead of 1, depending on the direction of the traffic. And also to probably generate the inbound and outbound listeners. So it's going to be more like a flag change somewhere in listeners. So this is not assigned.
Yeah, so actually it should be assigned to Piotr because he's doing the primary work.
Yeah. So will he do the pilot,
yes.
do you think?
Probably not pilot, so someone else will have to help once he's done his part. The reason why this is a P0 is because it's a major usability drag on the product, right? We make people do more work than we would like them to have to do. And it also didn't meet kind of the no surprises usability goal, right? They installed it and they wanted Istio on for everything. And Istio wasn't on for ports that weren't declared, but traffic was still flowing. So they didn't see it. So those were the kind of 2 usability expectations of the product that were getting violated. And that's why we need to make a change here. So.
Okay.
And that is one that would block the release.
Because
it's a major user experience thing.
Okay, I think this is probably not a P0. That's a P2. So I don't have a way to sort nicely, like to filter by.
These are all the unassigned ones.
And that's a P2. So the problem is we actually assign them to somebody, but that doesn't mean that...
yeah, it's not. I just temporarily assigned it to like a bunch of people so that they can actually ping the posters and then ask them for updates. And if not, they would close the issue as stale because most of them were like pointed at like 0.7 or 0.4 release. And we had asked them to upgrade to 0.8 to see if the issue still persists. But if they don't respond within 10 days, we just close the issue.
Yeah. So we're going to have the stale bot stuff. Christopher kindly kicked off that process. I was talking to Seb this morning about getting that turned on. That will help, right? Particularly on customer issues, right, where we need more info. If they don't respond, like then it will ping them.
Yeah.
It'll also ping us on issues that have been assigned that people haven't done any triage on. The usual kind of 30-day, 90-day stuff. Envoy is already doing this. I've gotten pinged a few times. I'm sure Sriram has gotten pinged a few times over the last week. And it's actually quite effective as a project management tool. So I'm looking forward to getting that turned on.
Okay, like the thing is, it's this imbalance. I have 16 of them open, assigned to me. I don't think I can work on all of them. So what would the process be here? Should we clear?
You just go through some of, so it's like I used to sit and go through like 100 of them, and this was just like one GitHub page, and you just like go ping each of these authors and then again come back after a week and a half, and if they haven't responded, you just close the issues. But maybe the stale bot would probably help, but this was just a way to like for a human to go and see if some of these are still relevant or not, and based on that, like you could just like close.
So we'll get better at the triaging process so that we know that bugs have been triaged. One of the goals, obviously, is triage is to assign bugs. Right. Usually, what you have is some kind of automated system that when bugs come in, it just kind of round robins the bugs among the available people in a particular area. They'll do the initial round of triage. They'll either pick a better assignee, or they'll remove themselves completely, or they'll keep the bug.
Okay.
And that's the first phase. Right, and then once the bug has a real assignee, then it's their responsibility to maintain the bug. The stale bot will prod them. If a bug is unassigned, then it needs to be triaged again, or it's marked as help wanted, right, and then it can stay unassigned.
Okay.
Right, we don't have all that automation in place right now, but we're trying to start adding some of it.
Yeah, so I think it's
but the other
pretty tricky.
useful to have.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Christopher.
Like for issues, how would you expect that to work? Just look at the owner's file, maybe.
So what I'd like to have is when an issue gets raised, right? If it doesn't have an area assigned to it, right? There's a triage process that gets an area assigned to it. Each area is assigned with a group, right? So we already have the GitHub groups like network hackers, right? So what the tool would do is it would just pick somebody out of that group and say, well, you guys are collectively responsible for the area. One of you gets this issue to triage it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's how we would do the kind of first round basic load balancing.
Okay,
Just-
yeah, I'm working
just
on that for
triage.
kind of PRs right now at the moment for Envoy, but that should be portable that I can do that for Istio as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to maybe have a more detailed conversation or thread offline, Christopher, about how we'd like to get this set up. I mean, we're going to talk about some of it with the stale bot, but we can talk about it for triage and assignment too.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a tool internally called Blunderbuss, which it does this, just shoots one of the people in the group with the issue.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But that's a reasonable way of doing it.
So I think it would be good for everybody to actually do the exercise of checking their own issues, like the issues that are assigned, and see like what is reasonable really for 1.0. Do what Shriram described, like ping the author if there is a request for more info. By the way, there is a label called kind info requested, I think.
Right.
Need more info, okay? So feel free to attach this label and also request more info. And if you think you can work on it, keep it assigned. If you think there is like not a reasonable chance to work on that, at least unassign yourself, add help needed, community help needed label, so that whenever we go through the issues, we can see actually what doesn't have an owner, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's always a background process for triaging unassigned issues.
Mm-hmm.
What I would suggest everybody to do is to go through all the issues currently targeted for the 1.0 milestone that are P0 or P1.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go any further than that. If you're going to get past your P1s, I would be amazed.
Yeah, the only thing with the P0, I think they really need to install the Zen Hub.
Yeah, you have to install the Zen Hub.
To see the P0, like, let me see if I can like load it here. I'm not. Okay.
You see it in GitHub. So if you go back to the GitHub, right, in the lists, right, you can't filter by it, but it's showing you the.
Oh, actually, yeah, that's true. There is this little thing here where my mouse is. Yeah.
But you can't select by it.
All
Yeah,
right.
you can't
Yeah, you
filter by
cannot
it,
filter, but at least you can skip.
But if you filter by the assignee as yourself, then at least your list would be crazy.
Yeah, actually, we kind of have one P0, one P1. So there are probably more P0s than we want. Like, I think there are about 40, I would say, just by visual inspection.
If you want to filter by priority and milestone, then you have to go into Zen Hub to do it.
Yeah, I don't know why. Oh, there it is. Okay, so Zen Hub looks like this. It's a Kanban style. And here we can...
So maybe select yourself as the assignee.
Okay, let's see. And I select myself. I want to see where is the... Okay, the P0s are here. P1s are here.
Right.
And these new issues, they have not been
these are on triage.
Assigned the priority. Yeah, they are not triaged with the priority. They are with the area. So they both belong to area networking.
Right. So as everybody understands, this is what I use to go through all the new issues and do a kind of first line triage, because we don't have any of the tooling in place right now.
Yeah.
But it lets you see how many P0s, P1s you have, and you can tie them back to the milestones. So you can kind of look at what work you're currently slated to do for 1.0.
Actually, I'm going to unassign myself from this one, right? Because I don't plan to work on it. And I think people will not help here if there is already somebody assigned.
Yeah, it's also in the nebulous future milestones.
Yeah.
So feel free to unassign issues from yourself.
1.0.
As long as they have a milestone and a priority.
Yeah.
When you do it.
Much better now. For instance. Yeah. Let's take Martin here. Okay, Martin, you have quite a few also, see?
Yeah, those ones I haven't been able to farm out yet. So some of them need more info. Some of them I haven't been able to find a victim.
Okay. Yeah, but look at them. You have oh my God, you have quite a lot of P0s.
So let's pick one of Martin's at random. So let's triage it for him.
Okay. Do you want to choose? This is a hard one. We know what it is.
That one you can skip over because those ones I am working on. Okay, how about that one?
This one.
Yeah.
This doesn't look like a P0, does it? Some incorrect warnings.
So, I mean, this clearly doesn't look like it blocks anybody using the thing in production.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, we still have
It can be reproduced. Okay. But no, somebody can reproduce it.
Yeah. So anyway.
How about we mark this as a P1?
I don't know, it's a P2 maybe.
Let's give it a chance. So I mean, this might hide some serious issue, right?
Maybe. But we're still prioritizing it lower than known serious issues.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay.
Well, I mean, the way it's worded, an incorrect warning, I would say it's P2 if it's really an incorrect warning, but maybe it's just the language.
Yeah, I think that it's, if you read through the bug, there's more to it than appears on the first few lines.
Okay. Do you think it's still P's? So let's go down the bottom.
The warning is done.
Oh, this is a customer issue, isn't it?
So you see, it might actually hide the problem that would cause traffic loss.
Yeah. When you triage your bugs, feel free to change the title of the bug to more accurately represent what it is. I think I know where this one is coming from.
Okay, so actually we might have a PR on that. So you might be off the hook, but maybe I should assign it to our Langlet.
Yeah, actually that sounds like a good idea.
Actually, this is a good example.
Actually, the problem is he's not in Istio organization and I cannot assign to him. Yeah. You say like he's not here. So there are sometimes cases when people want to work and we cannot assign directly the issue to them.
I think he should be though, because he's done a few PRs.
Right, but I think he has to make a request to join.
Okay,
yeah.
So probably we should ask.
Okay. So yeah, there's a thread going on with the TOC about whether we give people explicit collaborators read access so that they can be assigned issues. There's a permissioning problem in GitHub that makes this a bit of a pain in the ass. But either way, if the GitHub issue, if the PR is being merged, do we
just close the issue?
Right, should the issue just be closed? Right?
Yeah, I would
the
say.
PR has not been.
It is merged. Just
right. Yeah. So why is the issue not closed?
It's not automatically
closed. Time to go through his bugs.
Yeah, I actually haven't.
Can I close it?
I think we could potentially close it if. I mean, I'd like to have a look at the fix.
Feel free.
Well, yeah. I mean,
one down.
Yes, closing bugs is always the best type of triage.
Okay.
So I think one thing that's generally useful is it's good to set aside some time to just go through all your bugs and do the triage. And if you can close them. If you do all the priority milestone things, so that we have some idea what the aggregate backlog is. Because right now we just have this heap of P0s and people came in. When is 1.0 shipping? And we're like, I just don't know because we have a bunch of amount of P0s.
Right, and there is work happening that is not necessarily associated with an issue. So, for instance, Sriram has a list of things, and there are PRs coming, but we don't have issues for them. So it's very hard to predict, in terms of when we are ready or not.
In general, there should be an issue, whether it's a feature, an enhancement, or a customer bug associated with every piece of work that's going on in the project.
Because that can be used to justify the quality of the release and when we ship and when not to ship, right? So
yeah. So if you are doing work that's not associated with an issue, go create a feature enhancement request, give it the right labels, so we can track it.
Yeah. Okay. I guess that's it. And if you have P0s and they shouldn't be P0, please change them to lower priority, because at some point people will start chasing us for for P0s. Like the TPMs will ask us every day, what's the status on this P0? So if it shouldn't be P0, change the priority. And we're actually running out of time with the triage exercise. So any last minute thing?
Well, no. So does everybody feel comfortable that they can do this? Or do people feel like they need more context about what's kind of needed to stay on top of this stuff? And so, like,
Anybody?
So quick question, there's a bunch of issues which says like get protocol X to beta, and then get protocol Y to beta, and then I think when a few months ago, like there was like about 1 million issues created saying that incomplete tests X. I think I closed a whole bunch of them, but there is still like some very arbitrary like get gRPC to beta. And what does that even mean? I guess like maybe in gRPC there's probably one example of a long running connection, but there's a whole bunch of them which are marked as P0s, and these are like, I think these could actually be closed, or I don't know what is the criterion for.
Yeah, so what was missing for those was a good test coverage, right? So that we can claim it's better. So for instance, we discovered the problems with long-running connections, right? Like TCP connections dropping because of certificate refresh. So that's why those issues exist. However, if you, for instance, are confident that we are like in good shape with gRPC as an example, and we have a long-running connection, we're using gRPC type of traffic and everything, right? Like you have the authority to actually decide that particular protocol is in beta, and just close the issue. Right? So those were all about testing and about our confidence in a particular feature. And like all these protocols, I think they are required features for 1.0, right? Like we won't ship Istio without these in good shape.
Yeah, so
everybody agrees.
Yeah, so those issues are really like epics, right? I mean, what they ultimately break down into is a bunch of smaller issues. I don't think they're currently tracked as epics, those ones.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
So I think, as long as there are detailed bugs covering the gaps, I think it's okay to close the umbrella ones.
What would that help to close the umbrella?
The umbrella ones are nebulous, right?
Well, not in this case. Like
as an example, right? If there was only one outstanding technical issue around long-running connections and cert rotation to say gRPC was fine, right? If you want to treat the gRPC one as an epic and say, well, there's only one outstanding issue in the epic, and it's this one, or you're not going to treat it as an epic, and therefore you're just better off having a more detailed bug and getting rid of the old one.
Right, if it's one-to-one. But like, look in this case, high availability for pilots, right? So right now, what did we have here? So like under HA for pilot, we have a bunch of things. We had the auto scaling. I don't think it's in yet, right? It covers like liveness and readiness checks. It has like have data plane continue to function, like all these, like maybe not all of them are
right, but this is
right, but this is an epic, and I don't want to close it because it helps me see the status,
an epic,
right?
Don't close it.
Yeah.
Right. If it's not an epic, you have to decide what to do with it.
Yeah.
Either turn it into an epic or don't.
Yeah.
So Shriram, does that answer your question? Because most of those bugs really are epics, right? They're like, they represent the life cycle of getting a feature to production quality. If you see some that haven't been treated as epics, then you can always ping me or Andrea, and we'll try and help you figure out either turn it into an epic or we can retire it.
Yeah,
but it's very easy to turn something into an epic. You just assign the label epic.
Right.
That makes it an epic.
Yeah. So you use your best judgment about whether something's an epic or not. How about that?
Okay. Yeah.
Epic equal features, I think, like a bigger feature that may sprout in a few directions. Yeah. We're really going out of time, so I think we'll probably get more feedback. Also, we can get it offline, so please feel free to email the networking, Istio Networking or Istio Dev if you have suggestions for how to improve the triage process or questions about how to assign, unassign. Just, get a bit more predictability, I think, in our process.
Yeah, and if there's a specific issue you want to help triaging, you can always ping me, Andra, or Shriram.
Or just do it.
Well, if
right?
you're not if you have should I close it? Should I if you have a question, we're available, right? So we're happy to go over the same stuff again. Just ping me on Slack or one of the other people. There's the networking group. We can just bring topics up there too and ping people. So.
Actually, there is very little traffic by email, I think.
That's fine. The Slack is fine. Slack is good for triage.
Yeah. All right. So thanks, everybody, and see you in 2 weeks.
Except for me, I'm going on vacation for 3 weeks.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers.
I'm not sure how to stop recording.